Hi, I'm Paul Krutko, President and CEO of Ann Arbor Spark. Thank you for joining us for our annual Tech Talk program. We appreciate you inviting us into your home, office, or wherever you are right now, and promise the talks you're about to hear will be as inspiring in this format as they would be if we were sitting together in Michigan Theater. You'll hear today origin stories, behind-the-scenes accounts of the technologies being developed here, and how our speakers have achieved success in their careers. Tech Talk has provided the chance to hear from the brilliant minds behind the Ann Arbor region's innovative companies. Tech Talk is a part of our week-long A2 Tech 360 program, which showcases the Ann Arbor region as an area of innovation. A special thank you to KLA and the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti Smart Zone for sponsoring all of our A2 Tech 360 programming. It's my pleasure now to introduce John Mclaughlin of KLA. John couldn't be here with us today, but he recorded last week why Ann Arbor was the best place for one of the leading global semiconductor companies to locate a second headquarters and why they chose to invest heavily in our region. Without further ado, here's John.
Hello, I'm John Mclaughlin. I'm the KLA site lead responsible for our growing presence in Michigan. I was the first employee hired here, and I'm an Ann Arbor native. At KLA, we believe the future is ours to create. Whether it's a driverless car, VR experience, or factory robotics, we help turn theory into possibility. We help create technological devices and ideas that transform our future and shape our current life. The KLA team is excited to be growing here in Ann Arbor. We're thrilled to be putting our second North American headquarters here, and we've made great progress over the past 2 years as we build up our capabilities at the local level. At KLA, we design the tools that enable some of our most important technologies to be put into the hands of everyone. Our tools are critical to the production and inspection of semiconductors, flat panel displays, and printed circuit boards. And our teams are responsible for figuring out how to produce the next generation of these technologies. In the history of KLA, we have been actively leading with our partners in some of the most significant technological breakthroughs the world has seen. With our tools, the technologies you all know about can be produced with high quality and at scale, enabling things like smartphones to become ubiquitous in many parts of the world. We believe in advancing humanity, and we do that through our business and by working with partners to improve our world. The KLA Foundation funds projects and organizations across the globe in support of STEM education, wellness, and unmet needs, with a focus on communities where our employees live and work. This year, we launched a $2 million COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Fund, as well as a $1 million fund focused on social justice and racial equity. It is now my pleasure to introduce Susan Wagner, KLA's VP of Global Facilities and Real Estate, based right here in Ann Arbor. Susan joined KLA nearly 6 months ago after 22 years in global corporate real estate at Microsoft and 12 years in general construction across the US. Susan has her bachelor's degree in architectural engineering from the University of Kansas and relocated to Ann Arbor recently from Seattle. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, John. I joined KLA as an opportunity to take on a new and exciting career challenge, and my family and I are so happy to be here in Ann Arbor. My new role gives me a global view across the company, but also lets me be engaged here in Michigan with the local team. It's exciting to be a part of the KLA team here in Ann Arbor, building our second headquarters. KLA's new campus is an ultra-modern innovation center built on 18 acres, where we will house 600 employees in the next 3 to 4 years. From a facilities point of view, this is the largest KLA project currently. We are growing the team in a temporary space with the specific R&D requirements and clean rooms they need. The campus will be opening in the fall of 2021. As we construct the campus, we need to be agile and address quickly changing needs associated with COVID and beyond into the post-COVID environment when a vaccine is available. The KLA team in Ann Arbor includes a variety of AI, hardware, and software engineering teams, as well as corporate functions working together to innovate our next generation of products to support the growing semiconductor industry. Joining KLA in Ann Arbor has provided a unique opportunity to build something from the ground up, especially in terms of diversity and inclusion. Most large technology companies are investing in strategies to establish a diverse and inclusive workforce, and this is a journey that includes a focused effort on both inclusion and belonging to ensure everyone's voices can be heard and that people can bring their authentic self to work each day. Starting such a new operation allows the team to be diverse from day one. We at KLA have the opportunity to engage with the local community and reflect its diversity into the KLA teams in Ann Arbor. At KLA, diversity and inclusion is a shared aspiration, commitment, and responsibility. It is important to have a workforce that has the diversity required to support the innovation and creativity that it takes to move the world forward. If there's not diversity of thought, experience, and perspective, it limits the impact and success of teams and companies. Diversity without inclusion will not succeed. Diversity, as they say, is being asked to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance and engage. People to feel included also need to feel a sense of belonging. If we don't feel as if we belong, we will often leave to find a place where we can find that belonging. We need to show up in a way that is authentic, where we are willing to make sure our voices are heard. In order to strengthen the ability to be heard, those who feel marginalized also need allies. Allies are important to help amplify the voices of those they work with when often they are not heard or talked over or their ideas restated by others. Allies take the time to understand the perspective and experiences of those who feel marginalized so they can better understand and support them. When we consider diversity and inclusion, we want everyone to feel they are equals and will be heard and seen. We should work together to lift one another up. It does not mean just because others succeed that we will have to fail. If we all work together, as the saying goes, all boats will rise together. As our teams work together to achieve diversity and inclusion goals, employee resource groups are an important part. Mosaic Group in Ann Arbor is an umbrella diversity organization with a mission of increasing diversity, building inclusion, and growing community. While we work to grow and transform the Ann Arbor team, COVID is impacting the world, creating the necessity of a broad and diverse crisis management team that is leveraging all of the knowledge and skills we have built throughout our careers. Facilities, health and safety, and communications teams are often working in the background. Now they are essential and front and center due to the virus. The team had to take swift actions across the globe to keep employees safe while maintaining our essential business operations. KLA had established our guiding principles for how we work. Health and safety of our employees, including local requirements, is number one. Delivering for our customers and continuing to invest in R&D as well. KLA is a global company. COVID impacts to our employees and business can vary across the world. We have offices that are 100% working from home due to legal requirements, such as India. Offices with the majority focused on the return of essential workers, and a few offices such as Taiwan and China who are back to basically 100% working from the office. The response to COVID remains fluid, and the protocols we have put in place enable us to monitor and adjust to accommodate the on-site situation, balancing the safety and productivity of our employees. We have contracted with a medical director and an industrial hygienist as subject matter experts to help guide us in our protocols and processes. COVID is not only transforming our world, it is accelerating technology. The semiconductor industry is essential and has not faced widespread slowdowns during the pandemic as it utilizes extensive automation throughout manufacturing. The semiconductor industry is playing an instrumental role in enabling the shift to working and going to school at home, medical devices, and remote healthcare. Many of these changes are here to stay. As demand increases for devices, Wi-Fi, and 5G, so does the need for semiconductors. At KLA, we believe that technology has a meaningful and positive impact on the world. Electronics are more important than ever to keep us connected and productive during these unusual times. As a company, we have had to be agile, change our practices, but we continue to move forward. Still hiring during COVID with virtual onboarding, 44% of our Ann Arbor employees have started since we went virtual. I am optimistic about our team, our growth in Ann Arbor, and our new campus as KLA's second headquarters. We are all looking forward to having Ann Arbor as part of the global communities KLA supports.
Thank you, Susan. Next up is Tara Lanigan, Director of Policy and Advocacy at May Mobility. May Mobility is a startup transforming cities using self-driving shuttles. Prior to her current role, Tara helped build a pipeline for growth and strong public-private partnerships as May Mobility's Director of Business Development. She has expertise in equitable mobility and D&I and is an active member in Women in Mobility and Shine and Rise. Today, Tara will present shared mobility and open streets during and after a pandemic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Lanigan. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at May Mobility, a self-driving shuttle startup here in Ann Arbor. So I've loved cities and public transportation for my whole life, and I've been lucky enough to live in a lot of cities throughout the years. I was raised outside of Los Angeles. I've lived in Detroit, London, Ann Arbor, and New York. And I got around in each city quite differently. So in Orange County, growing up there, public transportation was not necessarily robust, so I rode my bike until I could drive. In New York and London, I pretty much rode the subway and the bus everywhere I went. In Detroit, I did everything. I walked, I biked, I rode e-scooters, I used the Q line, and I drove my car. And here in Ann Arbor, I tend to walk or drive. And everyone has kind of their favorite way of getting around. Mine's more historical. I loved taking the tube in London, which is their subway. I could read while I was commuting. It was really clean. And I loved the British accent of the announcer. And here at May Mobility, our team is constantly making it as fun as possible for our commuters to get around. We want it to be safe, fun, and we want them to enjoy it as part of their day. And I know that not everyone is constantly thinking about transportation like I am. I work at a mobility startup. It's what I'm supposed to do all the time. But I know that everyone can relate to deciding how they're going to get around, whether it's on the daily or if they're making a new decision, whether to buy a car, move to a new city, just depending on what their line of thinking is. I think we can also all relate to the fact that the pandemic has really adjusted that decision-making for all of us and has made a big impact. And as we personally start making those decisions about how we're moving around differently in a pandemic, companies and cities that are focused on mobility are also changing their way of thinking. At May Mobility, we had to make technical and hardware decisions to change our offering to make people feel safe again riding public transportation. So for us, that meant adding something to our shuttles that made it feel safe and clean for passengers again. Whether it was adding UVC lighting or a partition in the vehicle, foggers, we added everything to make it feel completely different and safe again. We were excited to relaunch this in Grand Rapids in our deployment there earlier last month. And we couldn't do this alone. It very much took a village. So again, collaboration is the key there, and we couldn't have done it without any of the Michigan organizations that helped here. But this clean shuttle is really just a small piece of the puzzle of the larger idea that the pandemic is bringing up changes needed in transportation that were already needed before COVID-19 hit. And what I really mean here is one thing I wanted to highlight specifically is this idea of open streets. If you've been around outside Ann Arbor lately, you'll have noticed that the city has closed down some of our more crowded streets for restaurants to expand their patios and for pedestrians to feel safe walking around outside. And it's not just Ann Arbor that's been doing this. It's been done in Minneapolis. We've seen it done with the art fair in Ann Arbor. A lot of temporary examples of cities closing down streets to center around pedestrians, micromobility options, and public transit. And it's not just Ann Arbor that's addressing COVID with this implementation. It's other larger cities that are far bigger and have more traffic, like Philadelphia, New York, San Francisco, Chicago. And again, this is not a new issue. It's just something that's being brought up by this pandemic. And it's something that harkens back to this idea that cities should be built around people, not cars. And that's something we really care about at May Mobility, which you might look at me sideways because we deploy vehicles, but this is actually why I work at May Mobility, because we envision a future of mobility that's built around people. Our mission is to reimagine transportation through autonomous technology, to imagine cities in a safe, accessible, and fun way for people. And this, again, is not only an issue that May Mobility focuses on, and it's not something new. There's already tons of initiatives right here in Ann Arbor that are addressing this pedestrian, micromobility, public transit-centric mobility. The DDA initiated the public bike lane that's blocked off as a bike-dedicated lane on William Street in downtown Ann Arbor. And the Office for Future Mobility and Innovation announced last month the AV corridor that will run from Detroit to Ann Arbor, allowing for people to go between the two cities in a way that they haven't been able to before, and connecting them in a more easy fashion. And there are tons of mobility organizations and institutions around the Washtenaw County area that are thinking about these ideas daily, like I am and like my colleagues are. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't bring up the fact that we have a long way to go. And in conversations with a lot of the mobility companies you see up here, and with mobility companies and cities across the US over the last 6 months, with the pandemic being so prevalent, I've noticed a few themes come up within the mobility world that I think could really be useful as questions for other industries across the world. It's not just a mobility problem, it's questions that we could be asking ourselves from every sector. And the first one is, what existing challenges does the pandemic magnify? And I brought this up earlier, but it's worth repeating. And pandemic is really interchangeable with any public health crisis today, whether it's COVID-19, lack of accessibility, systemic racism, whatever it may be, we have to be doing this reflecting, and it's a journey that will likely never end. But it should be closely followed by the question of how can we work together to make a new reality? And this is where those smaller pieces of the puzzle come in, like May Mobility's Clean Shuttle that we collaborated on with many organizations across Michigan. It's things you can't do by yourself, it's things that make up a larger whole that we should be working on together. And of course, I'm excited to hopefully soon safely return to London, ride the tube again, but I'm really more excited to see how the regional transportation landscape evolves and changes over the next few years from what we've learned this year from the pandemic that we should have applied to issues long before. And so I can start adjusting my own, how do I get around story as I move through life into new cities, seeing how the Southeast Michigan landscape brings those answers for me in my transportation journey. So that's all for me today. Of course, it's an ongoing conversation, so please reach out if you'd like to chat further, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. Up next is Hein Lam. Hein is the Chief Prophecy Fulfiller at Huck Finch, a strategic branding studio based at Spark East in Ypsilanti. Before Huck Finch, Hein started a personal development blog called Chill Pill that shows people how to live up to their potential. Hein was also temporarily ordained as a Buddhist monk. His talk will focus on lessons he's learned from fellow entrepreneurs that have shaped his life and business.
Hi, I'm excited to be sharing lessons I've learned from entrepreneurs who have been guests on my podcast, Life on Brand. These are lessons that have guided me, especially during these trying and challenging times. So let's turn that weirdness up to an 11 by acknowledging a simple fact in life, which is you, yes you, are gonna die someday. So if you have aspirations and desires to be an entrepreneur, today is to do it. Make today count and every day after this count towards achieving that goal. That's a funny saying, make every day count. Has anybody actually taken the time to figure out how many days there actually are to count? Well, this weirdo has. And by my calculations, we all have approximately 26,000 days, give or take. And the bad news is that we've already used up some of these days. And while this may seem somewhat morbid, somewhat macabre, the OG philosopher Marcus Aurelius teaches us that the act of dying is one of the act of life. And that by meditating on the end, we start to truly appreciate how short and precious life truly is, and that we stop putting things off to tomorrow and start doing the important things today. So rather than talk about death for this entire time, which I probably could, I want to spark some joy by sharing these lessons that I've used to help to live my life on brand and to help me make every single day count. But what might make sense is to allow myself to introduce myself. My name is Hein, like the ketchup without the Z. I co-own Huck Finch, a strategic branding studio based in Nipsey, where we make purpose-driven brands the norm rather than the exception. And we do this by distilling a brand's essence into messaging and visual design that's scroll-worthy, vibrant, and colorful AF. And yes, I know, that sounds very good. And just because running a business wasn't hard enough, we decided to start a podcast, which is where the lessons will come from today. The podcast is called Life on Brand. We've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the tech field here locally, in Silicon Valley and globally, and wanted to really capture and distill down the entrepreneurial experience. And while I wish I could share lessons from every one of our amazing guests who are way smarter than me, I don't have the time. So I've distilled things down to 3 lessons from Jason Fried, Eli Altman, and David Klingenberger. And I know what you're probably thinking. I've seen talks like this before. These people have shared lessons, but I never knew how to apply them. Is this going to be one of those talks? And to that I say, don't even trip, dog. Actionable tips are also coming your way. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with lesson number 1 from Jason Fried. And Jason teaches us that businesses go out of business if they're not profitable. That sounds really obvious when you say it out loud, but as entrepreneurs, we need to prioritize profitability from day one. Because if we don't, then we really can't keep our lights on for very long. And the best way to do this is to build a runway. Calculate your monthly expenses and figure out how long can your business run without the ability to bring in any revenue. And then figure out how much you want to have in the bank to cover those monthly expenses, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And honestly, I can't stress enough how important this lesson has been for us, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when things were really chaotic and unpredictable. Lesson number 2 comes from Eli Altman of 100 Monkeys. And while you may not be familiar with his name, you may be familiar with some of the things he has named, such as Dolby Atmos, Ithaca, and my personal favorite, Morning Glory from Jamba Juice. And what Eli teaches us is that we don't want to be the Cheesecake Factory. And what this means is we should all strive to specialize and be really, really great at a few things rather than just meh at a whole bunch of things. So the best way to do this is to say no to things that we don't want to do. Taking Jason's lesson into account around profitability, as you figure out what profitability looks like for your business, ask yourself, if money isn't an object, what would I say hell yeah to, no matter what, all day, every day, to run your business? And what would you say hell no to? And for all the hell no's, figure out how you're going to cover them just to make sure that your business runs as smoothly as possible. And then lastly, we have a lesson from David Klingenberger of The Brinery. And what David teaches us is that we need to invest in social capital. While it sounds really romantic and exciting, the idea, the story of an entrepreneur pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps and doing things on their own, the fact of the matter is, based on all the conversations I've had with entrepreneurs, that's just not how it works. It takes a village. It takes a community. It takes those around you that want you to be successful for you to be successful. And I'm standing here on the backs of giants who have helped me be successful in what I do. And the best way to do this is to give more than you take. To do this, come up with 5-minute favors. The fact of the matter is, you are talented and gifted, and there are those out there, especially right now, who could really use your skills. So how can you package down what you do into 5-minute favors that can be highly impactful for those around you? And the more you give to those around you, the more they're going to give back to you. And that's it. Those are the lessons I wanted to share with everybody today. But to make sure that you don't forget me, I'm going to share some bonus tips that I've learned on this path of entrepreneurship. And the first being, problems make us unique. While we typically see problems as barriers, we should be looking at problems as differentiators. And if you can frame problems the right way, they can be the things that make your business stand out. Next, you should never ever follow passion. It's terrible advice because passion only comes after you invest in time and energy into something. So just go out there and do the work, and then eventually passion will find its way to you. And lastly, all good things come to an end, in life and in business. So start there. Imagine a day your business no longer exists. How do you want it to be remembered? What did it achieve? How did it inspire others around you? And then create a roadmap and a path to ensure you can bring this vision to life. I started this with a quote. I'm going to end it with one from a modern day philosopher, Shia LaBeouf. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Go out there and do it. You have less than 26,000 days to live your dreams and to live your life on brand and to pursue your entrepreneurial goals. As I mentioned, you're gifted and you're talented. And hopefully the lessons I've shared today from Jason, Eli, and David all help you on that path the way they have helped me. So go out there, be bold, even extra light, but never ever normal. And if you found these lessons valuable, check out the podcast. Shameless plug. There are other great lessons to be learned from there from people who are way smarter than me that can help guide you to ensure that you live your entrepreneurial life on brand. And in a non-pandemic world, if you see me on the streets, come up and give me a predator handshake. To me, that's the highest honor. So thank you for your time, and be safe and rock a mask. Thanks.
Thank you, Hein. Next, we'll hear from Brandon Martin, founder of Reaction Technologies. Brandon's a lifelong student and a fan of football, which led him to found a company to address player safety. Reaction Technologies helps protect athletes through a neuromuscular training methodology. It immediately provides a player and a coach the ability to identify and correct incorrect form at the moment it happens. Let's listen to Brandon's talk about his entrepreneurial journey.
My name is Brandon Martin, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Reaction Technologies. I am from Round Rock, Texas, which is 10 minutes outside of Austin, Texas. I just recently moved to the Ann Arbor area after getting accepted into Sparks Incubator Program. Growing up, sports was always a major part of my life. The things you learn through sports, how to put somebody else in front of you, how to put in the work where nobody's watching, are things that I carried on in my life as I got older. I remember being 18 years old, playing football, getting a scholarship to play college football, and then having to come home because of school. I remember my dad asking me, what am I gonna do with the rest of my life? And I remember breaking down in tears, crying, because I truly couldn't answer that question. So over the next couple of years, I truly was stuck and no real passion, not really thinking about the future or what the future holds. 4 years ago, I seen a story on ESPN about Donovan Hill. Donovan Hill was a 13-year-old football player in California. Donovan was known on the team as being one of the better players on the team, and coaches thought that he was going to be a for sure college football player. Donovan came in the game to make a tackle with the crown of his helmet, suffering a spinal injury. At the age of 13 years old, Donovan was paralyzed. Seeing this story, I was in tears watching this story. Seeing the game that I love and so many people love affect a family in such a negative way and a kid in such a negative way, I knew right then and there that I wanted to try to make a difference. Over the next couple of days, I started thinking of different ways to try to help minimize these type of injuries. We came up with a product that we felt coaches could use to help teach proper tackling technique at every level of football. Over the next 6 months, I truly became obsessed with this. I would fall asleep thinking about this. I would wake up thinking about this. The next step was trying to get the people closest to me to believe in my dreams and to believe in the product. So I reached out to my family. I reached out to my friends to just get their idea to see if they thought I had something. The feedback I got from them was that they thought we had a product that could really make the game of football safer. And by my surprise, they really, truly believed that I could do this. Once I realized that I could do this, I felt like this is what I was put on this earth to do, is to try to make the game of football safer. My family, my friends have been such a big part of this all the way up. A short story, my business partner, I'll never forget, I went to Texas Roadhouse. We went to Texas Roadhouse to eat. And I remember having all these papers on the ground, just showing them what I thought the product could be. Giving them the whole pitch, thought this was it. And I remember him saying, when are you ready to do this? Let's go. Our goal is truly to try to make the game of football safer. I did not get in this to make money. I got in this to make the game of football safer and leave a legacy. Participation in football has declined over the last couple years because of the safety of the game. To hear that really concerned me because I learned a lot of life lessons through the game of football and sports in particular. After we realized we had an idea, we had something, we started looking for product design companies in Texas to build out our first prototype. We see our product being used in multiple sports as a situational training device to help enhance the athlete's abilities in other sports besides football. Our goal is to make a difference in the game of football at all levels. We want to be on the front lines of making the game of football safer. I would like to thank Spark for giving me this opportunity to speak today. And if you would like to know more about our business at Reaction Technologies, you can look us up at reaction-tech.com. Thank you for this opportunity again, and you have a great day.
Thanks, Brandon. Our next presenter is Jasmine Burns, Head of People at Census, a growing cybersecurity startup in Ann Arbor. With over 10 years of human resources experience, she was previously with Duo Security and 4C Results. Jasmine is a regular speaker for Venture for America, Hacker Fellows, and presents on topics around recruiting and D&I. She's passionate about evangelizing people-first cultures. Let's hear what she's learned about D&I from employees that she couldn't have learned anywhere else.
Hi everybody, I'm Jasmine Burns. I'm head of people at Census in downtown Ann Arbor. We are a cybersecurity company with about 50 employees and just closed our Series A funding round a couple weeks ago. So excited to climb yet another big mountain ahead of us and see some more success. I'm excited today to share with you some learnings that I, as head of people, experienced in the last few months surrounding diversity and inclusion, specifically around some of the things that my employees actually taught me that I wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. So no secret, you can find a lot online today. There's so many resources and consultants on diversity and inclusion work, but actually some of the lessons that my employees taught me I think were the most profound and the most heartfelt. So without further ado, the first learning retrospective I'll go over, probably what I would call my most overarching, is the philosophical question of what role an organization should play in societal issues is still up for debate. So in speaking with my father-in-law a couple of weeks ago, we were exchanging kind of our own experiences within our own organizations and talking about the letters that our CEOs were sending out and the town halls that were happening and the conversations that were happening. And he actually works for a multi-billion-dollar top automaker in the world. And I had this epiphany that what we are experiencing at a measly startup of 50 employees and what he's experiencing at a global enterprise really wasn't that different. That there's still ambiguity and there's still an unanswered question of the role an organization should play. So what my employees taught me is that it's not really that important that this is still an unanswered question. What's more important is that we need to take a stance and we need to advertise it, both internally and externally. And the reason for that, I think, is that I know that this question will never be answered, or at least not anytime soon. But what I do think we can do as a society is allow employees to make the decision of whether or not they want to work for an organization because their values align or don't align with that company and the stance that they take. If you have a culture of psychological safety, your employees will speak their mind on those issues. So if you're unfamiliar with this concept of psychological safety, it's basically the ability to create and foster a culture and an organization where people can ask questions, speak their mind, and not be afraid of negative consequences at all. And typically this concept applies mostly to business. However, I realized, my employees taught me, that this concept actually applies even more so to things like diversity and inclusion. D&I work is probably the most emotionally charged conversation you'll have in the workplace today. And if you have psychological safety, your employees will speak their mind and they will have their voices be heard. And that's a really amazing thing. What I will caution you is that you need to be prepared to respond in a thoughtful way because if you don't, you will actually remove psychological safety on the business side. You have to create and protect that space for open dialogue, genuine listening, and real support. So if you work somewhere where psychological safety actually isn't a thing and you are not fostering that in the environment, I would encourage you to look it up, because it is proven and studies show that it leads to exponential business outcomes. However, at minimum, and in the meantime, you have to create a space where you can have open dialogue, where employees feel like they can show up, talk about how they're feeling, ask questions, and talk to leaders directly. But actually what is most important, and thank you to my employees for teaching me this, is your leaders have to show up as genuine listeners. That cannot be emphasized more or enough. So if you have leaders that are showing up to these conversations or these open dialogues and they're monopolizing the conversation, your employees will start to feel like, actually this space is not protected. And I just don't feel like I'm supported to just come in and talk about how I feel on this stuff. So important for you to just listen. Next learning. This one is a little bit of a personal learning for me, and I'm gonna get kind of vulnerable for a second. So I'll go back to kind of the beginning of what we know as the modern movement around diversity, inclusion, and social injustice. And I remember replaying this thing over in my head, this idea of like, I'm not an expert on this stuff. And I've been immersed in D&I, and I have some amazing mentors who have taught me a lot about diversity and inclusion work, but I am not an expert. And I felt a little bit like an imposter. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to steward my employees through this stuff. And I think I assumed that because I'm not an expert, my employees definitely aren't experts. And that's probably true. But what's important is just because they are not experts, it doesn't mean they don't have good ideas. And I'm really thankful to the employees that voiced the ideas that they heard, because I realized something in this conversation. That if you have employees that are passionate enough about the ideas that they have, they're probably going to champion it. And if you're a team of one like I am, or you have limited resources for diversity and inclusion, you have somebody carrying the work and the effort behind that, and that is an amazing thing. Executive and leaders might not have the answers. Of course they don't, they're human. But what I think is probably the biggest takeaway here, and what I realized and my employees pointed out, is that they might not be on the same page. And what I'm realizing and still learning is that everybody is on a different part of their journey when it comes to learning and educating themselves about D&I and about social justice and equality. And that goes all the way up to the top. And I realized, and my employees showed out, that just because they're executives doesn't mean they have all the answers. That reigns true on pretty much everything, but especially on something like D&I that is, coinciding with this new world of work and showing up more and more, especially in the summer of 2020. You have people that come from all different types of experiences, all different types of backgrounds, and they definitely won't be on the same page, at least not in the beginning, until they've had conversations, and they might not ever be on the same page. And that's important to realize as an employee. Don't bucket your leadership into certain philosophies or certain ways of thinking on all of this. Another reminder, more than a learning, actions speak louder than words. They do every time. However, showing up hollow or imperfectly could have a negative impact. In fact, it most likely definitely will. So I'm thinking back to what you all might remember as Blackout Tuesday. And this was probably the day in the summer where social media was at its height in terms of the conversation. And a lot of employers were posting things like, we stand with our Black community and, Black Lives Matter. And a lot of our employees were kind of asking, why are we not posting anything? And I actually started to get a little bit frustrated and kind of confused on who I needed to talk to make this happen, and how do we come up with the right thing to say that makes sense for us at Census, at my company. And in speaking with a leader kind of later on in the afternoon, I realized, we all have to get us aligned on the same page, like I just mentioned, but showing up and not being either that genuine listener or showing up hollow could actually be way worse than not showing up at all. And I'm grateful for kind of the compassion and the empathy that our employees showed, and it was a big learning for us. And lastly, what's right for your organization might not be right for another. This couldn't be more true about anything, actually. What's really important, and I would challenge every organization to do, is think about your own strategy and how that aligns to your own values as a company and areas in which you are most passionate with. So I'm going to go take us back to the initial days of the movement and talking to one of my leaders. And I said something like, why don't we just put something out on Twitter? Or why don't we just start a targeted effort to hire more Black employees? And they actually made me realize that this person held a passion around systemic racism and poverty, and said, I really think that we should do coding boot camps, and we should, mentor youth in the community that might come from underprivileged backgrounds. And I realized that's actually where we can affect change right now in this moment. And just because other CEOs on Twitter or in social media are doing things, or you're seeing other companies do things, it doesn't mean that it's right for your own organization. So I would challenge everybody to think about their own values and make the decision of whether or not they align with your own. Thank you for listening, and please reach out to me if you have any questions. And remember, we're all in this together.
Thank you, Jasmine. Up next is Dr. Robert Alexander, the CEO and co-founder of Aura Lab. Aura Lab, a 2017 Entrepreneur Bootcamp participant and a current client at Spark East, helps individuals through transformational breathing technology. As a NASA fellow, Robert worked with scientists at the Goddard Space Flight Center to transform our understanding of the solar wind through auditory data analysis. Before launching Aura Lab, he worked as the Chief Innovation Officer at the University of Michigan and lectured on sound design and psychology at the renowned HK Polytechnical University School of Design. Robert will deliver a tech talk on what inspired him to start his own company.
Hey, my name is Robert Alexander. I am the co-founder and CEO of Aura Lab, and we create healing technologies. That's right, healing technologies. It might sound like a little bit of an oxymoron when we think about what it feels like to sit in front of our laptops and to pull out our phones, particularly in this post-pandemic world that we live in. We get so many messages about the nefarious feelings of when you go down the social media rabbit hole, taking social media detoxes and cleanses. And what I want to impart today is the fact that our technology can be so deeply healing and so deeply transformative. In fact, Marshall McLuhan talks about the sensorium. He talks about the way that the shoe naturally extends the foot, the way that our glasses naturally extend our eyes. And by extension, our devices, our computers, and our phones are natural extensions of ourselves, if you think about it, right? The way that we connect with each other, the way that we connect with ourselves, is defined so deeply by the way that we engage with our devices. In my whole life, I've had this unique relationship where I've been super creative in the way I love to make music, I love to make art, I love to just get on my computer and I love to play. And I also recognize that that's not how everyone engages with their devices. And so I just want to share a couple ways that my tech has showed up in my life in a really healing and powerful way, and impart some ideas that you might also reframe your relationship with technology. So over the course of my PhD at University of Michigan, I was working with these NASA research scientists, and we were studying the sun by turning it into sound. It's this process called sonification. If you look at this image behind me, it's got this exploding sun with the color and the light and everything. So this represents that process of taking the data and transforming it in a way where we're using our ears to suddenly understand outer space in a new way. And we were able to make new discoveries about outer space by just listening to the sun. And so here I was in my kind of open, infinite, boundless, playful space as a creator, when suddenly I received a phone call. And it was from my sister, Amanda. And this is a phone call that was the hardest of my life, because she told me that my mother had passed away. And I remember just collapsing, just crumbling on the ground, not wanting it to be true. I remember just being in this puddle on the floor, just wishing I could just melt through the earth. And for the next week, my family came out and they just wrapped me up in so much love and so much support and so much care. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want this to end, this feeling of being connected with my family. I want to have this my whole life, because they all live on different parts of the world. What I did was I just opened my device then, and I just gathered everyone around. And I pulled up the sound recorder, and I just said, can we tell stories? Can we just share stories about my mother that maybe I haven't heard before? And so for over 2 hours, I listened as my uncles and cousins, and just close family friends, all shared stories about how my mother had touched their lives in some way. And then when I went back, I did what I love to do so deeply. I took up my tech and I just cut up all of the audio into individual tracks. And I took photos. I went through photo albums and was just seeing the faces of my family, seeing the faces of my mother. And I took the pictures of the pictures and I made those the album art for this album that I called the Memory Circle. And so over the next series of months, as I was just moving through the grieving process, I would just go into my room, turn out the lights, get underneath the sheets, be in my little ball, and listen to the voices and the laughter of the people that I love so dearly. And here we've got my cousin Molly. She's reaching into this bowl to make what my mother called Molly cookies. She tells this story in the Memory Circle about how my mother would ask, have you continued to make these Molly cookies? She would check in. And the fact that that interaction, though so brief, became a formative part of what it means to feel important. And to be able to have a person that you share with deeply all of your life experiences can really contribute to your profound sense of self-worth. And I then moved all the way to the other side of the planet, leaving all of my friends and family behind, and I started teaching at Hong Kong University, right? So suddenly I didn't have that environment that was naturally supportive in the way that it had been for many, many years. And I woke up one morning and I thought, what can I do to bring that natural sense of support back into my life? And I realized there are probably some words that I could hear right now that would help to remind me of that sense of connection, help to remind me what's important. And so I went online to a text-to-speech tool and I just typed in all the messages that I thought would help to uplift me. And I created a new set of guided meditations. This one's called Deepest Truth, Walking in Public, because I would just walk on my way to work, pop this one on. It would remind me of kindness. It would remind me of gratitude. It would remind me to look around and see all the faces of the people around me as fundamentally innocent. And these little reminders, the ability to engage with my tech and remember who I am, remember what I care about, is something that I've learned so many ways to infuse into my life. My business partner actually turned me on to this app called Yap, where you can just have it give you 9 random reminders throughout the day. So this one right here, what are you grateful for? And just ask yourself right now, take a deep breath. What are you grateful for? Anything that comes to mind, what are you grateful for? Even just contemplating that question can invoke this feeling of warmth in your body, this feeling of being connected someplace deep, somewhere really vital and important. And so when I ask myself this question, what am I grateful for? I think about the technology that I've been able to develop with my amazing team over the last several years. And that technology is Breathscape. This tech takes the breath and turns it into music in real time just using a phone. So I can place this device against my body, take a deep breath in, and exhale. It generates visuals, it generates music in real time. It's like I've got an orchestra right there writing music for me in that moment. And I've recorded the voice of my aunt so that I can play back her voice reading these words that touch my heart so deeply. And I can take her anywhere that I go. And I've had ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs, you know, life. And yet throughout all of it, I've had this technology to help bring me back to that place of deep peace and deep relaxation. And so if I impart anything with this talk, it's think about your relationship with your tech. Does it feel like your tech is supporting you? Does it feel like your tech is nurturing and nourishing you? And I'd also like to invite you to try something like this Breathscape technology, because it's amazing to hear from all the users right now, people who have migraines that they've been struggling with, and even medication hasn't been working, and they try this, and their migraines start to ameliorate. They're struggling with anxiety, they're having sleepless nights, and they try the app, and it finally helps them to get a grip. And so for me, it's been so profound to be able to take something that started as just this healing tool for myself, to keep my head above water and to keep me in alignment with what feels like my true path, to be able to share that with the world and to have it resonate with others. So thank you so much for your time today. And just keep asking that question, what am I grateful for?
Thanks, Robert. Our next Tech Talk is by Dr. Mitch Rode, the CEO and co-founder of Quantum Signal, an advanced math-based engineering R&D company headquartered in Saline. Under Mitch's leadership, the company has been building and delivering intelligent algorithms for 2 decades, including extensive work in autonomous and robotic vehicle technology systems and tools. In 2019, QSI was acquired by Ford Autonomous Vehicles, LLC, and he now continues to manage the organization with a new dedicated focus on building the future of transportation. In his Tech Talk, Mitch will present what it takes to be a great engineer.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. My name is Mitch Rode. It's great to be here. I've spent my entire career as an engineer co-founding and leading Quantum Signal, which is an engineering company located in Saline, Michigan, that was sold to Ford Autonomous Vehicles last year. It was a pretty exciting time for all of us and for the team and for the company, and certainly one for me that brought a lot of changes. It's given me a lot of time to reflect, and after 20 years of small business grinding and hard work, I was able to take a breath and think about what it means, a lot about life and what it means to be an engineer. And so I thought today I'd just share one of the thoughts that I had, and I thought it might be of interest to folks out there. I think when it comes to engineering, there are 2 key factors to being a great engineer. The first factor is a desire to make things better. And I don't think that that's very controversial, because I think most engineers, if you've gone into engineering for the right reason, go into it with the idea of helping people and building a better world. The second thing I'd say is a love of pattern recognition. Now, why would I say that? Let's talk about that here today. Pattern recognition is one of those threads that when I look at my life is something that's run through the entire segment of it. And so I'm really interested in talking about that and studying it. My experience with pattern recognition is very, very broad. And so I put some of the examples up here on the board. I started in high school working on neural coding in crayfish and how the neural impulses travel down the fibers and impact muscle movement and things like that. I morphed that project through as an undergrad and graduate student into building direct brain interfaces for folks with severe motor disabilities. And that was all a big pattern recognition project. Later on, when I started Quantum Signal, one of our earliest projects was in biometrics for the US government. And that was face recognition and speaker verification. And that's all a pattern recognition problem. Thirdly, when I think about the projects that we've done over the years, surveillance and forensics, a lot of detection and tracking and identification and processing of things like people and vehicles and faces and objects from surveillance feeds and still images and on and on and on, and looking at counterfeit documents and other things in the forensics field. And all of those use algorithms that are pattern recognition focused. Nowadays, everyone will talk about AI, artificial intelligence. You don't hear about pattern recognition, you hear about AI, right? We used to call it signal processing. And so the idea was to take in data, apply algorithms, characterize that data, and come out with something that was useful in terms of things that you wanted to do with it and make some decisions. But whether it's biometric data, surveillance feeds, neural codes from crayfish, it doesn't matter. Data is data, and we're applying algorithms to get something useful, and pattern recognition is the core. AI, by the way, is, I think, kind of a misnomer and overused, because some of us that have studied the brain and others of us that are really interested really hope intelligence is more than an artificial neural network. But regardless of what you call it, AI, signal processing, whatever, at its core is pattern recognition. So when I think about engineering and I think about life, why do I get excited? Why do I talk about pattern recognition? Well, if you can recognize the patterns, right, you can understand the system, you can model that system, you can work with it, you can make decisions, you can do all sorts of things and build upon it. The social scientists have known this for a long time, right? All the social scientists do things like study civilization, patterns in civilizations, They study patterns in politics. They study patterns in animal and human behavior. This gets them where they want to go and is an important part of what they do. A Spanish philosopher gave us a phrase or a quote that most people have heard in one way or another, which is, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And while he wasn't an engineer, I think the concept is not lost in that, pattern recognition is really where it's at. Now, for an engineer at a micro level, why would you be interested in this? Well, it lets you build solutions to real problems in an effective way. And so I show some examples up here on the board where we talk about things like, say the Netflix algorithm that looks at the last 6 months of your crappy television watching and recommends the next 6 months of your crappy television watching. Or we have things like the Amazon algorithm that looks at the things you bought and suggests things that might be good with it. Or an AI that is applied to an MRI that spots points in the MRI and points out to the doctor, we might want to take a look at this. Or as a last example, stock day trading algorithms and day trading software that look at your stock portfolio and look at the markets and suggest buy or sell or run. Now at a macro level, it helps you as an engineer know where the technology is going. And the classical example is computing power, where if you look at computing power 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last year, today, it helps you project forward what it's going to look like tomorrow, 12 months from now, 24 months from now, and you can plan your products based on that. And the second example on a macro level is products. If you look at prior technology-focused product launches over years, you see what worked and what didn't work, what went big and what failed. And if you're building products and technology as an engineer would, you're interested in optimizing your position and making sure that your products don't fail. And so looking at those patterns is really important. The third and last example I have is that when you talk about the time lags between a core invention and when things actually change our lives, they can vary a lot. They can be 6 months, they could be a year, they could be 10 years. This is from when a big invention happens to when it impacts you in your house. And so by knowing those time lags or seeing the patterns there, you can see the next invention and predict when it's going to come through and make some difference in your lifestyle. The point is that engineers study patterns so they can get an idea of where the trends are and they can incorporate that and focus their technology development efforts. Google, Apple, Ford, IBM, all the big boys know this. They adapt their plans, technology business-wise, to flow with the patterns, and that's why they're successful, and they have been for a very long time and will continue to be. If you're an engineer but not a fan of pattern recognition, I'm not saying that you have to be. You can still succeed. If you look at the history of technology development and engineering, it's littered with happy accidents and great breakthroughs and things like that. I'm just saying that if you want to optimize your chances of making a big impact, studying the patterns can make a huge difference, and it helps you use the information that's available to you to optimize your chances. So what patterns am I looking at today as a pattern recognition kind of guy? The first area is very job-centric, right? So autonomous vehicles, mobile robotics, near and dear to my heart. What are the trends in the technology? What are the trends in the adoption? And when are they going to become truly ubiquitous, as the dream has been for many, many years, at least since I was a kid? And so that's something I study and look at a lot. The second trend I would say is pretty meta. As an algorithm developer and AI type guy, I'm always interested in the trends and patterns in AI and how they go into real world solutions, how deep those solutions are, and whether they actually make any difference for anybody. Because you can build a lot of stuff, and if it doesn't make any difference or make our life better, I don't know what the point is. And then the third one is all fun, because I'm a fun type of dude, and that's entertainment and technology. What comes next in that fusion, and how is it going to help us better realize, to be able to visualize and interact with our dreams in movies and games and whatever? Because I think entertainment is a huge part of our lives, and it's important to see where the patterns and trends are and how we can optimize and maximize our stuff there. Now, this philosophy does kind of beat me up every once in a while and slap me in the face. About 20 years ago, I took my wife to see a movie about a mathematician named John Nash called A Beautiful Mind, which is a fantastic movie. There's a very important scene in which Nash is looking at newspapers and documents up on a wall and drawing various connections, and there's patterns of numbers projected on panels, and he sees the patterns, and it's all visualized. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, "Sweetheart, that's exactly what I do for a living. That is the best visualization of signal processing and pattern recognition I've ever seen put on screen. It's fantastic. That's what I do." And then the next scene was revealing that that was mostly hallucination and that Nash was having a mental breakdown. So there was a little bit of laughter in my household, and that's just is what it is. That being said, and embarrassments aside, I still would argue that chance favors the prepared mind, and that pattern recognition is a muscle that every engineer should develop and leverage at any point that they can, because it's going to get you to where you want to be, which is developing technology and building products and solutions that really change things for everybody and make the world a better place and a difference for people around you. I really appreciate the attention. I hope everything is great and you appreciated this. I left my contact information up here. Get a hold of me anytime. Again, my name is Mitch Rode. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitch. Our final Tech Talk today is by Rachel Cash, founder and CEO of Elroy, a data management company. Rachel is an attorney with a passion for privacy and data compliance. Let's listen to her Tech Talk on why you must control your data to control your world.
Hello, my name is Rachel Cash, and I am the founder and CEO of Elroy. We are a privacy data management company focusing specifically on providing technology solutions for enterprises and consumers to help them manage their privacy information. But right now, what I want to talk to you about is my path as a non-tech founder of getting into technology and finding my purpose. And typically the path for some people look very straight line. You're an engineer or you're a lawyer. But really, I've kind of been on this little pink paper plane path in how I've gotten here. So in 2017, I graduated from North Carolina Central School of Law, which is a historically Black college. I was happy and really excited about graduating, and here's some truths when I graduated. I was focused on constitutional law and juvenile justice reform, and honestly had no idea how to move forward in life and where I was going to take my next steps. What they don't tell you about graduating from law school is you have about 2 days to celebrate and look happy like this. And I'm going to be mortified when I see this, but this is what it's going to look like once you start studying for the bar exam. So I studied full time for the bar exam. It was about 40 to 50 hours a week for the first 7 weeks. You cram in all the subjects you learned over 3 years and completed practice problems. In the last 2 weeks, you reviewed the law and take time exams. I am a Michigan-based startup. So yeah, I am very fierce about this. Hopefully this makes you guys laugh. But in Michigan, the Michigan bar consists of 15 essays. They're 20 minutes each and 200 multiple choice questions. So during this period of time, you're over the summer and preparing for this really big life-altering exam. The way the bar is set up in Michigan, you have the essays on the first day, and the second day you have the multiples. In those essays on the first day, you have 9 essays in the morning, which are 3 hours, and you have 6 essays in the afternoon, which are 2 hours. So you're located in a room that looks very much like this room, crammed together, scared, full of anxiety. And so I'll tell you the story of my bar exam and what happened. I completed my first 9 essays in the morning, feeling relatively confident, and my sister brought me lunch and was having a break in between the exam. We got back into the room and I came back and my computer screen looked very much like this one without the smiley face or the sad face. My face looked like the sad face, but my computer screen was black and panicking. Again, some truths. I never practiced taking my bar exam, writing my exams out in that 20 minutes. So I was in a full stage panic. Again, this is in 2017. The question I would pose is, what else happened in 2017 besides me, my computer crashing during the bar exam? A huge data breach. In fact, a data breach that impacted more than half of the United States consumers and exposed millions of records of personal information. This data breach was as high profile as the Cambridge and Facebook Analytica exposures, or even the exposures of the files that the government has been keeping on people. All this culminated into the perfect storm. And what I want to go back to a little bit is that as a law student, and while I was waiting for my exam results, I started reflecting on what I was interested in, so constitutional law, and how the law interacts with technology. Again, 2017 was a perfect storm for a law student. We had an oversaturated marketplace, there was no jobs, yet we have huge data privacy and security issues. In the Constitution, which I studied intensively in law school, the word privacy never appears. It's implied through the Third Amendment right, which is to prevent soldiers from coming into your house or taking over your quarters. The Fourth Amendment right is no illegal searches. The Fifth Amendment right, with everybody pretty much knows now and hopefully knows, plead the Fifth. It's your due process of the law, but it all encompasses your privacy protections. Another interesting thing that separates specifically this technology space for privacy is that we are seeing an exponential growth in legal changes in terms of technology and the intersections between cybersecurity and privacy. The GDPR went into effect in May of 2018. The GDPR is the European Union's privacy regulation that impacts US companies as well as any company that exchanges data with the European Union. It requires data protection officers, compliance, breach notifications, and individual users have access to personal data, something that completely has innovated and changed the legal field and provided a whole new job market. Most recently passed was the CCPA, which passed in January of 2020, so this year, and is continuing to change over time. Again, in the Constitution and constitutional law, we generally see the Supreme Court making regulations and laws and case laws and taking a very long time to see the changes in our everyday lives. But even now, as recently as in June, we're seeing constant changes in the legal impact of privacy and technology, as well as how we're dealing with data and security. The CCPA, so the California Consumer Privacy Act, gives individual users the right to delete their data, have access to their consumer request and request data returns, as well as the right to opt out of third-party selling, meaning you aren't providing your information to companies without your permission. This has caused a huge impact to enterprises. Enterprises now have to build huge technology systems that do data mapping, understanding the origin of their data and mapping back to the source systems and running data obfuscation or deletion. Now, one of the things when I talk about data privacy and how I got to this path is because of constitutional law and the existing reliance on technology, we see these really cool intersections between different disciplines, legal, creatives, and even the fields that we already recognize as technology fields. So we have huge campaigns from Apple to Facebook around privacy matters. But it's deeper than that when we really look at what's going on right now. Privacy really is implied in the Constitution. It's so important now that we have more and more regulations to fight for your privacy rights, to demand access rights to your data, and really talk about the commodification that happens with our personal information, which is really why I think we look at the perfect storm. So when I look at 2017 and I see what happened, my computer crashed, which I later found out was due to a bug that I had on my system. We have a huge data breach. We see that a perfect storm is created, and a quirky story of my own personal story has led me into technology and really being passionate and learning more about data systems. And what I challenge anybody who's a non-tech founder is to find our individual creative paths and implement it into our innovation systems. This field is in this world, technology innovation, isn't exclusive to technologists. We really need this interconnection between the law, creative spaces, people fighting for rights, from individual active tangible rights to our more invisible rights of your data protections. So I challenge you guys to move forward and as non-tech people to constantly integrate yourselves into technology and innovation. And I really hope that we can, one, innovate in how we're protecting everybody's rights, from privacy rights to social issue rights, but also really integrating yourself into data privacy. Thank you for your time today. My name is Rachel Cash, again, the founder and CEO of Elroy. I look forward to recreating the data ecosystem and seeing what you do to innovate going forward. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us for Tech Talk. Join us later this afternoon for our annual Tech Trek, A2 Tech 360's anchor event. For more information or to register, please visit www.a2tech360.com.